of Control Systems at this Norwegian University, which is the main technical university in Norway, in Trondheim. So let's get on to it. Okay. So this is the structure of my talk, a little introduction. I'll talk a little about the Eurozone debt crisis, electronic payment opportunities due to new technology, advantages of a parallel electronic currency as opposed to just a parallel currency, political considerations because this is not necessarily easy, an NGO currency as opposed to a government currency, and I'll say a few words in conclusion. So there are two papers here, and you can't see the links because of the color or something, but no worries, this will be made available through the conference convenience. But there are two papers, and the title of this talk is a bit misleading because it focuses solely on the issue of whether it's possible to exit in the Eurozone in a non-damaging way. But I also will talk about parallel currencies, and the second of the two papers are about parallel currencies outside the government. Let's call it NGO currencies. Before proceeding, thanks to Margaret Kennedy, who's talking later today, because she was my original inspirator for my interest in parallel currencies, which has been sort of switched on and off for 16 years. I'm a control engineer, and if you compare a complex monetary macro system to a complex process plants with like distillation columns, tanks, you have to keep control of pressure, temperature, flows, volumes, etc. and keep these within small bounds, and above all the system has to be stable. So this is my sort of attitude to complex systems. But in macroeconomics, at least in the mainstream, even instabilities are not recognized or very interesting, and as an engineer I can't understand it. From an engineering standpoint, if you have a complex system that doesn't work, you fix the system and you change the whole way of running it. Okay, so let's go to the Eurozone debt crisis. I don't have many diagrams here, it's mostly a verbal presentation and there will be no mathematics, but this is a diagram essentially showing a benevolent monetary circuit. You have firms, you have households who consume, and some of them also invest, and firms transact in between them, so these arrows are monetary flows. So you have stocks in these blocks, these units, in the firm units and in the household units, and you have flows between all the units. So essentially an economy is a collection of interrelated stocks and flows. That's my attitude, or my sort of understanding of an economic system on the macro level. No banks in this diagram, so let's put banks and finance into the system. At the bottom here is the diagram on the last page, a bit simplified. We have all the flows aggregated together, that's GDP, so it's using the traditional Y symbol. And if we add all the stocks together, held by households and firms, this is the monetary circulation system. And then we have this parasitic thing up here, which forces debt service out of the non-financial system down here. But it returns the money with conditions. And seen from the financial system, there is a leakage because they have to pay their wages and buy stuff for running the financial system. And seen from down here, this leakage is a good thing. If there was no leakage at all, you would simply have these flows here growing exponentially over the time, which in fact they do, even in spite of leakage. And what you get, you end up with a situation where these flows related to debt service and new loans completely crowd out the real economic flows, the aggregate arrow down here, and the system gets brittle. And that is my main take on how a financial capitalist system simply can't continue with financial accommodation. So this is my sort of very brief analysis of the euro crisis. Okay, and this is to Michael Hudson coming later on this conference, because he has that position, which I agree with. The fundamental problem is too much debt related to GDP. Debt must be written off, at least a large share of it. But parallel currencies, electronically mediated, can strongly ameliorate today's situation. And that will be my focus in the following. Okay, next bit of the presentation, electronic payment opportunities, which is a case of how technological developments makes things possible that were not possible earlier. These developments mercilessly tend towards the death of physical currency. That's my prediction. I say in some decades, that's a bit optimistic, but at least in 100 years. Example one, what's happening? Mobile phone payment system, like the M-Pesa system in Kenya, where people pay regular money using SMS via mobile phone. There are no, you don't need bills and coins, and you don't need a local bank branch, but you can pay the guy in the other village through the mobile system. That's coming up in several developing countries, and it works very well, for example, in Kenya. Example two, payment via FPOS card. It's also called a debit card, isn't it, in English? That you can use in the supermarket. Yeah, okay. Debit card, FPOS card. Take Norway, 5 million inhabitants, 12.3 million cards as of last year, 300 transactions per person per year, 200 transactions per second just before Christmas, run by a private company. Why do I involve this? Just to point that both the mobile phone system and the FPOS system has immense capacity. I mean, there is no technological limit to how much you can transact. And also, because these systems have worked over many years, they enjoy trust by the public. They have just as much trust as physical currency. Because, I mean, people do not lose money in them. Okay, next point, advantages of a parallel electronic currency. So I will go for mobile phones, not FPOS. And the reason for that is that with a mobile phone monetary mediation system, you don't need terminals. I mean, you know, in the shops they have terminals where you put your card in the FPOS system, and that's a bit expensive. And it's not something that you can establish in a large scale in a parallel system for a low cost. So use the existing mobile system. So we imagine a mobile system resembling the Kenyan system, but with parallel currency, not regular currency. And it's run by some branch of the central bank in a euro crisis country. And let us call this EC, emergency currency. Later on, I will come to doing this outside the government and the central bank in a given country. So relax, it's not necessarily dependent upon the government doing this. But I'll go through that first. Public employees are partly paid in ECs, emergency currency, say 30% at the outset, but the share increasing, the rest in euros. That may seem a large amount, but we are talking about countries with over 20% regular unemployment and over 50% regular youth unemployment. So the situation is completely dramatic. A massive hiring of unemployed into the public sector takes place. These are paid in the same euro EC mix. The National Central Bank creates electronic ECs out of thin air and lends this for the government to spend. This is large-scale deficit spending. I put lend in quotation marks because I consider the central bank to be part of a government, which is the distinction is artificial and very political. All citizens and firms have EC accounts at the central bank. All EC transactions go via mobile phone. This is technologically possible, and there is no capacity limit to speak of. This can be used to partly pay taxes. This is an incentive for firms and persons to have confidence in ECs following the modern, sorry?
Could you be less quick?
Okay. Yeah. I'll be less quick. Okay. This is an incentive for firms and persons to have confidence in ECs following the modern monetary theory or charterist argument, which I agree with. Some of you may not know about that position or debate, but we can take that in the question session. Such a system, that's my prediction, optimistic, will in a time span of a few weeks strongly improve the situation. It is very fast and cheap to establish compared to a parallel system with bills and coins. And speed is essential, since the Troika will probably try to quash it using legal arguments. The system has to get popular before the Troika gains momentum. A second advantage is that a black economy in ECs is nearly impossible. The same with tax evasion. Any transaction goes via the computer at the central bank. You can have intelligent programs evaluating all transactions 24 hours a day and popping up suspicious activities. So black economy and crime is really suddenly very difficult. Advantage number 3, A3, there is no confusion with the bills and coins like euros that also are circulating in parallel. Advantage 4, by enabling activation of idle labor and production capacity, exports increase. So thus, even if this new activity is mediated in ECs, you will have increased export capacity for the country, which gives it a better position towards the surrounding countries. Advantage 5, circulation in euros within the crisis country will also increase due to reduced pessimism, less liquidity preference. Those who hold euros will get more optimistic and they will increase their money velocity. So you have increased euro flows, also giving a better situation. Advantage 6, which is a long story here, but it's simply that now there is a blackmail situation. These countries have to borrow euros to survive and use most of it to pay down earlier loans. Now they have a parallel currency circulating, and that means that their negotiation position towards their creditors is much better. Advantage 7, this is a 100% reserve system using the term of Irving Fisher, and that means all deposits are high-powered money, base money at the central bank, no deposit insurance needed, confidence at maximum. Also, some more futuristic advantages. Merit mentioned Silvio Gesel's demurrage can be implemented in an electronic system. You don't have to do stamps to bills or anything. And here a new, probably controversial idea, a flow control mechanism for an overheated theoretical future economy, an adjustable transfer tax between any accounts, a tiny transfer tax, so you're simply punished if you spend your money. So it's a flow tax, and that is the opposite of the demurrage mechanism. It blocks spending in an overheated situation. That is also possible in this electronic via the central bank system. So the above system is run by the government plus its central bank. Further below, I'll discuss the case of a system outside the government, NGO money. Okay, and now to political considerations. This is my political view. The EU elite, corporations, mainstream media pundits, and other powers are wedded to the Euro project. They will fight such solutions with tooth and nail, probably even the elite in the hardest hit Euro crisis country. You could, just to be nice to them, you could suggest keeping the euro. You can have your euro, but as a bridge currency, like Keynes did for a world currency, the bunker, his proposal from Bretton Woods in 1944, and letting EU countries implement national currencies with exchange rate control mechanism in the spirit of Keynes' original proposal. So this is sort of, we can offer them this idea. You can have your ECB and your euro and your visions and everything, but could we do this? But would that convince? I'm pessimistic and believe that any reform that may be interpreted as a step backwards towards more national autonomy will be refused. So, NGO currency. We assume that an alliance of popular organizations, possibly including some creative firm, establishes a NETS, a national exchange trading system. This national scope, as opposed to the traditional LETS implementations, has now become possible because using the mobile network. Most arguments given earlier for the convenience of a government-run mobile-mediated emergency currency also holds for a NETS. Imagine giving out, say, 1,000 value points, notice I don't call it currency, to any individual being a member of the NETS. They need not be initially earned, they are given out. This is the kickstart system. All individuals that are members of organizations in the NETS alliance automatically receives these points. Any other individual or firm can open a NETS account, even if they are not given the 1,000 points initially. The VP's faith, not fiat currency. Will it flop? Obviously, that's the question. Well, consider two system properties, need and confidence. Confidence will be net near zero, but need will be immense at the start. Think of Greece and Spain. Need will ensure that some accept VPs as payment initially. This will increase confidence somewhat, and a positive contagion process will unfold. How much time? No? 2 minutes. Okay, I'll finish soon. The VP will probably reach some fairly stable value after a start at zero or close to zero value, and of course some initial volatility. You can't get away from that. Note that since the initial issued amount of value points are given out, this is an experiment that, if unsuccessful, may be terminated with minimum legal consequences. You can't complain if points that you got as a gift are taken away from you, so you can stop the whole thing. It's not a dangerous experiment. This is a medium of exchange in crisis. It's not a vehicle for saving or accumulation. But if we can discuss that later on, if the scheme gets truly successful. One may expect strong resistance from above to an NGO-run parallel currency, from the EU system, but also from domestic elites, including governments. The scheme depends on gaining strong popular support and fast. Introduction of an NGO-implemented parallel national currency will necessarily be accompanied by intense political struggle. Anyway, is there some entrepreneur out there with both a big heart and a big brain? Starting and running a NETS system, many in crisis-hit countries, is a big, exciting and meaningful business opportunity. I mean, you can earn regular money on doing that today. Okay, last one, words in conclusion. As all here probably have noted, there is hardly any public debate about alternative monetary solutions, even after the recent years of a global crisis that resembles the Great Depression. I'm finished soon. Of the 30s. Keynes hit the nail on the head when he said, worldly wisdom teaches that it is better for the reputation to fail conventionally than to succeed unconventionally. So this is an uphill battle, but worth it, and less difficult today due to technology. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for being perfectly on time. And, well, I'd like to introduce now Marissa Freer, who's going to organise her PowerPoints. Now, Marissa, for the last 18 years, has been legal counsel for the Central Bank of Brazil, and she's now on sabbatical. She did a doctorate in social currencies, and she's now on sabbatical studying at the London School of Economics, doing research into complementary currencies. So this is, I think, a very interesting example of central banks getting involved in a subject which is dear to our hearts. So thank you very much. Please proceed.
First of all, I would like to thank Josh and the Net New Economic Foundation, the Forte Foundation, for the opportunity to be here to speak about social money. I try to, what I would like to do is to share with you my experience researching on the subject. In truth, I spent 10% of my time at the central bank at defending the legality of the use of complementary currency. And I have been writing about it. And I'm going, first of all, to give you a brief overview of the alternative currency credit systems in Brazil under the Brazilian law, so you can have an idea of the context where the studies is inserted. And why we need a complementary currency system, especially for poor communities, which are not at least targeted by the microfinance programs of the financial institutions. And how can we build a complementary currency system for sustainable and inclusive finance, which is my current research. I'll try to speak quickly with all my difficulties with the English, so I hope you can understand as much as you can, and don't try to read the slides because I'm only going to comment, and it will be available if you want to go in there. So the Brazilian experiment with complementary currency was mentioned at the 2010 report on a creative economy from the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. And I think, well, everything started when there was a law which recognized the necessity of alternative credit systems and the civil for NGOs. When you are trying to make an experimentation for not-for-profit, you can get a qualification by the Ministry of Justice in Brazil, and this puts you in a category that if enterprises give you some funds to fund your activity, they will not pay a tax on there is an exemption. And the Solidarity Finance initiatives, they came the first time with this kind of organization. Any kind of NGO can qualify for being a civil society public interest organization. The first case was the Community Bank Palmas. It was a long and slow development. After the law, they were qualified as OCIP, and which is the civil society of public interest, and the central bank challenged the legality of the use of a complementary currency, and tried to stop it, but they went to the justice, and they had a judicial decision that they were not issuing money. They were using a tool for local development. And then the central bank, before the decision, the central bank had to review its position, and it was already maintaining conversation to understand what was going on. After that, they has received support from the Brazilian government, and there is the first signed document, official document, in support of social money and the community development banks, which were signed by the Ministry of Labor and Employment, the Ministry of Social Development, and the Ministry of Agrarian Development. And the central bank started a project to study social money, and I was the technical coordinator for this project, which after we concluded that was not illegal, it was included in the financial inclusion project of the central bank. The central bank is very active in Brazil, trying to find ways to include the more number of the poor population in financial services and products. And now we are just discussing the regulation. Should we regulate it or not? the communities want us to regulate it because they want to be, they feel they would be safe and they wouldn't be challenged because Brazil is very big and every time they are running another system, they are challenged and they have to go to the police as they are doing a crime and the police has to write to the central bank and then they have to study this specific case and get them smart work on that. But now they are like recognized as community development banks. They are hired by the financial institutions as non-banking agents, so they can provide for in poor communities all kinds of services on behalf of the banks, the authorized banks, and they can offer loans with special interest rates under the other programs of the government for microcredit. And they offer loans with no interest using a local social currency system, which is supported by discounts in the local commerce. And they also provide training and capacity building for community members with the view of territorial and solidarity economic development. It's almost impossible to discuss here the process of legal analysis to conclude that the community currency in Brazil wasn't considered illegal, but we start with it should not resemble the official legal tender and it should not have effects in the normal circulation of the official money. And we have many laws. And if he passed the test of compatibility, which is very difficult, they will be considered not illegal, but this does not mean that they are legal. It's something very interesting, and we'll tell you about that. So the social money today is considered in Brazil a tool to promote local development and a new way to promote the integration of people to the labor market. I was very happy to know about the Tron's work because it's almost what he says. If you cannot work, if you are without employment, you can have another way to find an economic living in your life. And we have in Brazil a very democratic constitution which has strong economic and social rights for the individual and for community. So it would be a tool that would be protected by if it's experimented to local development, it would be protected by constitutional law. And for this reason, there is now a national action to promote the solidarity economy and a special program on solidarity finance based on community banks and with the solidarity funds, and some of them, almost all of them, use complementary currency. And we have now like a big challenge because the multi-year plan of the federal government wants to include more than 200 communities in solidarity finance. And this would mean like 200 social currencies, different social currencies. And that's why the communities who are running these currencies, they want to have a more legal certainty to their work because they spend lots of time and volunteer work on this. And then I'll try to briefly tell you about the challenges on the legal and technical issues that are meriting further research in almost all the countries. While it's legally possible to establish complementary currency and the development of the creative institution has been targeted as one of the goals of the federal government for elimination of poverty, to construct an adequate legal and regulatory framework is not an easy task because you can, when you regulate need to supervise and you need to restrict some rights, and sometimes it's the freedom that is important for the program to be successful. And the other challenge is how to enable this small scale solidarity finance to serve continuously these poor communities and the small and medium businesses. And, but the lack of, this is what I defended in my PhD thesis, that the lack of this legal and regulatory framework works like a Damocles sword. Because we say the people are free to run these systems, but they have to comply with the law that they do not know exactly which are the details of the law. And then but I say also, if you cross the limit, you will be punished, and this is a crime, and you can be in jail. So the lack of this adequate legal and regulatory framework, it's a violation of constitutional rights, because the people cannot exercise their rights because they do not know which are the limits. And there will be always a gray zone. Why? Because the main goal of monetary policy is to keep the level of aggregate expenditure consistent with the production capacity. And I cannot explain everything about that, but all new currency system and all alternative affects in some way the purchasing power. If I use a complementary currency to buy something, but not the aggregate level. Sometimes you have a very big impact for the individual and for the community, and you have no impact or positive impact for the macro level. So you have to analyze each case to see if it's possible. It's not possible with a complex economy to do that in each case. So it's much easier for a lawyer at the central bank to say, this is not legal, because I do not have to think, I do not have to understand about that, I do not have to waste my time saying that something, study which are the technical design of this specific scheme to see if produces one effect or other. But in almost all jurisdictions, there are many legal and regulatory issues that are open for discussion. So we do not have like someone that is really good on this kind of matter to just adapt to our context. We need really to develop the knowledge like we are doing here or in other forums. And the first question is exactly which would be the ideal legal and regulatory, but we have many other things that we should discuss. But what I would like to emphasize here is why I think a complementary currency is necessary, is exactly because you have a strong inequality of access to financial instruments in the financial system. If you take a picture of all the financial assets that we have in one financial system, and this is the picture of Brazil in 2009, you will see that you have you have a mismatch between people, the amount of money, and the number of people. And you have too many people in the bottom, and too few people in the top, with too much money in the top and few money in the bottom, but everybody in a common currency area or in the national economy are obliged to use the national currency. But they do not have access to create money with the same equal treatment. This part are like people who are not included in the formal financial instruments, and they do not have access. And you need to develop a complementary kind of currency so they can make transactions in real economy. In Brazil, this represents like 1/4 of the community, the whole country. And you have the many programs of transfer of income. And the bad news is that the state cannot do anything for that because more debt instruments inside the system will make the problem worse. And the good news, which is not new, is that the currency is created by the human intelligence, and we can work out to have a more compatible designs. So we already have all technology and legal techniques to do that, and to facilitate and maintain the reciprocity of social relations in the free market of exchange at the bottom of the pyramid without harming the macroeconomic economy. And always will be money denominated in legal tender and social money or common tender that could be accepted without any law, even in the informal economy. So I'm just going to show very quickly my current research is about how to build the currency system that works out. And I propose it will be in partnership with the private, public, and civil society organization, and with electronic system as defended by Tom. And we need to find a canon of measure for each local social money, from an initial quantity of resource that need not to be money, as he said, it could be values or points, something like that. An adequate distribution of rights and responsibility, everybody being equally treated within the system. And the velocity of growth is devolved to the community. As they can create money, they would do it. And just we have today in the Brazilian economy plenty of resources for doing that, because we have donors and we have banks that have to destinate 2% of sight deposit for microfinance, and they are not doing that, and they are punished leaving the money without interest at the central bank. And we have many programs that could be used. The thing is to design, to measure the economic impact, which is very important because it's the way that you will know if the system is legally or not. Trust and management, we have techniques to do that, and creating conditions for local development. I saw a question about taxes, and the local government in Brazil, they create a program of saving points where you give your number, fiscal number, when you buy something in the commerce. And then at the end of the year, they discount that on your housing taxes or other kind of taxes. For example, I earned like $600 and I didn't have to pay my tax in housing tax this year. And this is not to be reading, or because I want to have time, just to show you what I'm working. We're using this connection between complementary currency and the banks, and we can assure that all the accounts have a tendency to grow, even the debt instruments, if we use initial resources from money, and we can run win-win game. So all the participants, all the system will grow like that, all the participants' accounts, and all the monetary resources that could be appropriated by investors or government or who else work in the scheme to maintain the system. And that's it. I thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very inspiring, and I hope your message gets spread around to all the other central banks around the world to start experimenting. I think the statement of this conference should draw attention to your leadership and this example as what the central banking system can do. Now, I'd like to introduce Professor Dr. Margaret Kennedy, who 30 years ago was the head of the Department of Researching Ecology and Energy in Berlin. And it occurred to her that there's a problem with the money system of earning interest. And for the next 15 years, she part-time promoted, developed this idea, and has been full-time in it for the next 15 years. So I'll leave it over to Margaret to share with her insights, which have spread around the world. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you, Shan. And thank the organizers for inviting us, because I think this is a wonderful place to meet some people that you always wanted to meet, like Marusa, Trond, like Michael, and so on, and to have the opportunity to exchange your experiences. I'm going to go back to how do I now? Tell me how to change. Oh, this is sequence. First I have to learn okay, very good. So, as you see, I shortened the title of my lecture from the program to just using new concepts we can rule money. The reason is that there is a wonderful picture on the Spiegel some months ago, which shows, and the subtitle says, "Money rules the world, but who rules money?" It shows the leaders of the richest nations in the world being puppets at from the global stock exchange. You can't see that very well here, but basically all on strings. Exactly, that's a much better way. But let's keep the lights out, because this will be helpful for the presentation. Thank you. Will you keep the lights out? Can you please leave the lights on, because it will be much better to read the presentation. Okay, well, this is the situation. According to an IMF statistic, we have had 124 banking crises, 326 currency crises, and 64 debt crises within the short time span of 37 years. The basic message of this slide is, it is not a problem of having some bankers who are screwing the system, who are getting more than they actually should. I don't believe the whole problem we're in is a problem of personalities, or the, as heißt Gier in English, greed, the greed of people, as we discussed the other night. I think it is a systemic problem we're having. And when I discovered some 30 years ago this graph, I suddenly understood why the growth of money, which is growing exponentially with interest and compound interest, and the growth in nature, which is always stopping at an optimal size, can never ever help me to get enough money for my ecological projects. And this also shows that once, if this natural growth curve would also apply to an economy where at a certain point it is more or less saturated, then if the demands for money with interest cannot be met by the economy anymore, the only way to honor these demands is that the money system will go into speculation and more depend on growing in this realm, which is a virtual realm where growth can actually happen without being linked to anything real. The first misconceptions. I have learned that if I don't explain these three misconceptions, which are basic, there are 30 or more, which also are very important, but if you haven't understood these three misconceptions, I don't think you quite understand the necessity for the kinds of complementary currencies that we were talking about and new ways of dealing with money. So the first misconception is that people don't understand growth. Let me go back once again, because I have learned to not use the 1 penny at the time of Jesus Christ to explain exponential growth, because people will say, oh, by the year 2000, when you need like several billion balls of gold of the weight of the earth at the price of gold in this year, then people will say, oh, banks have never existed for thousands of years, so we might as well forget about it. So I'm using another example to show that we really don't understand exponential growth. And to me, this is the most essential point of the whole lecture. And I'm asking people, if you were given the chance to either get 10,000 euros a week for a year, or 1 penny in the first week, and then it's double that every other week for 52 weeks, what would you choose? Most people will choose the 10,000. Other people who understand a little bit about exponential growth will say the 1 penny, but nobody has ever anywhere estimated what comes out at the end of the 52nd week. And I'm sure you can't either, unless you use your computer. It is 45 billion euros, that is 2/3 of the gross national product of the whole entire world, that come out at the end of 52 weeks. And what it shows is that we neither intuitively nor rationally can really estimate this exponential growth. And to me, that is one of the most important mistakes and misconceptions that grows, because we usually think everything stops somewhere. Well, this will not stop until it breaks down. So, next one. Then this is very quickly, you have to understand that interest and compound interest is contained in all the prices, and that's like 12% in garbage collection, 38% drinking water, and 77% in public housing, because in Germany we reckon that a house will last for 100 years, and so, but the interest, even if it's paid off, is never taken off, so it is 77% over 100 years. And this has been looked at in Norway when they translated my book into Norwegian, it is exactly the same, so it applies to basically everywhere. But the worst part, which has not to do with ecology in the narrow sense, is the redistribution of money, because you can think, okay, everybody pays interest if they save money, everybody pays in all prices. So it's a fair system. Well, but if you look at who profits and who pays, then you see 80% of the people, this is the orange column, pay more, or twice as much on average than their fair share. With 10%, it equals out. And the last 10% get all that onto their income from interest through the prices, etc., which these 80% lose. So in Germany, that adds up to 600 million euros per day that are redistributed from the majority of the people to a small minority. And when I gave this lecture in Argentina some years ago, a central banker who had been working for the central bank for 37 years came up to me and said, would you please say at this point when you show this picture, what use is the equal right before the law to us if we don't have an equal right before money? And that man knew what he was talking about. Some results of the present money system with interest and compound interest, continual inflation. There is no country in the world that doesn't suffer from inflation. And when I went to the Diocletian Palace yesterday, I read through some of the letters, the explanations there, and they had already inflation at the time of Diocletian, of his realm. So it has been around for quite a while, and I think this is one of the worst things that everybody gets to get greedy, because nobody knows that if by the time they get their pension, whether it's worth the same amount as they actually put in. When my mother started an insurance to pay for her funeral in the 50s, she died in the 1990s, we could just buy a bunch of flowers for her grave. So that's the way. And another exponential growth pattern in monetary speculation, you know, the 2% of the world monetary transactions are sufficient for all the concrete things to exchange, including tourism, goods and services, and 98% are just speculative in the foreign exchange market. This was the euro time. It went back a little bit, but if you connect these points, it continues exponentially. this is an important statistic here, which shows that every debt, for Schuldung is debt, is mirrored by an asset. And this in Germany applies to the government. You see the government debts are actually increasing quite considerably. This is the businesses, in Germany, and these are private households. So you see that private households gain, on average, the most in this system, while their debts are decreasing, the debts of the government and the businesses are increasing. Now, there are a lot of people who think that if we could just give governments interest-free credits from a central bank that is being appointed by the government, we would resolve all the problems. It would do a lot. It would do a lot here. But it would not certainly be everything. That's why we have to really look at the total amount of assets. And I always say that our finance minister, the last one, to say that he's going to reduce government debts, no finance minister in Germany has ever been able to keep that promise. That when he says he wants to reduce the amount of debt, he should also say then I have to reduce the amount of assets, because it's parallel. But he will never say that, so we always get half the truth on television, etc. Anyway, I think Michael is going to have a solution for how to deal with this and how to deal with these amounts of debts, which I'm going to look forward to hearing. This also shows that in France, until 1973, there was a law that allowed the government to get interest-free loans. Now, we don't have the figures before 1979, but we do have the figures, and that is now showing the actual debt of the government in terms of relationship to the gross national product, which the last slide was also about. And if there had been no interest, the government's debts in relationship to the gross national product today would be, or in 2009, would be 8.6%. So this is really interesting, and it occurs. The graphic is given in the book that Bernard Lietaer wrote together with Arnsberger, with Christian, who is here, and a few other people, Sally Görner and Stefan Buschhuber, called Money and Sustainability, the Missing Link. It is the Club of Rome report of the European chapter, which they just finished. And there will be here 50 copies tomorrow, which you can buy for the price the publisher gave me, and I hope it will be here in time. This is just repeating what I just said, 78% of the GDP, that's what it is right now. And if the government had got the same conditions that they had before 73, it would only be 8% of GDP. So it would be very useful to have the central bank in the hands of the governments, or related to the governments, and giving them interest-free loans for their expenditures. Now, let me just give you a very brief compilation of what is contained in interest. Bank fees, risk premium, liquidity premium, that's what the saver gets for giving up some of his liquidity, inflationary adjustment at 8%. So if we could just cut out the liquidity premium, we would already end up with half that amount of credit cost. And if in Germany, on average, people pay about 40% interest in their daily lives, with an income of about 30,000 per year, that would be 12,000 that just goes for interest. While if you have demurrage, which is replacing interest, and I will show in a minute how, it would just be half of that, which would be an enormous saving for most people. Most complementary currencies are created without interest, and I just want to give you two small examples that show what kinds of mechanisms there are. You all know about time banks, and this is a time bank created in Japan. And the interesting thing about the time banks is that the hour credits are totally inflation-free, because an hour is an hour today and tomorrow and probably in 20 years as well. So wherever possible, time banks can really be a help, and this is using the time for younger people to help older people in order to save the problems that occur when you have a growing number of elderly, as we have in Europe and Japan. The Wirtschaftsring is a completely different construction. It's a parallel currency which exists in Switzerland since 1934, so over 70 years, and it has 60,000 members with an average turnover per 1.6 billion VIR. And the important thing about the VIR is that it proves to be anti-cyclical. You know, banks act pro-cyclically. When the going is good, you get any credit. If the going is bad, you don't. And therefore, they sort of help the boom and bust cycle, while the VIR, and that applies to basically all the complementary currencies, they are used mostly when the going is bad. Then they prove to be very helpful and stabilize the economy. And you can see that over 70 years in Switzerland, that whenever the economy gets into trouble, the turnover in VIR goes up. Very logical. If you can sell your wares in Swiss francs, why should you go into VIR? But if you can't anymore, it's helpful. So what we achieve with regional currencies is a partial decoupling from a globalized economy with the effect of making it more resilient, an increased use of regional products and services, added value and surpluses made in the region, community keeps essential public utilities, closer links between consumer and producer, and strengthening the regional identity and diversity, and reducing the need for transport and energy. The first model in Wordle, it's not very well, but anyway, they produced the first demurrage currency in Wordle with 1% stamp on the currency per month, which means 12% per year. And employment was reduced by 25% because everybody spent the money as soon as they got it. The town income increased by 35%. They even paid their taxes in advance. And the public works investment rose by 220% because that was the way this money was spent into circulation. And this is basically the model for all the regional currencies, which came about after Bernard Lietaer and I wrote a book where we sort of fantasized the idea of introducing regional currencies because it seemed to us there needed to be something on a level that was a little more encompassing than the local level. And so we have had, in the meantime, something like 80 currencies, of which maybe 30 function quite well, and the Chiemgauer is our most interesting and well-known model. It has now an annual turnover of 6 million euros, over 2,000 members, 600 firms, and 200 associations. They really profit from the money. And so the Chiemgauer donations, which come about when the firms return Chiemgauer and get euros for it, then these donations go to these associations. And these were 210,000 Chiemgauer since 2003. So these are the villages in Chiemgau that joined the system. And basically, one of the 25 suggestions, Tron's suggestion is one among 25 we found, to create a regional or a national currency for Greece, a parallel currency to the euro, that has, the Chiemgauer people have developed, based on their experience with the Chiemgauer, a very good proposal which you find under http://euromit.org. And I just want to show you that's the way they want the government to tell the central bank to issue what they call express money, which is backed by euros. The government spends it into circulation, gives it to pay their employees, to municipalities, commerce, etc. So this money would be an official complementary currency for Greece, and you could go back, you could get loans from commercial banks, which would be cheaper because that money would be based on demurrage. Therefore, in order not to lose money by demurrage, you would give it to the commercial banks. They could get cheaper loans, and if the commercial bank has too much, they would spend it, they would give it to the central bank. So they have a spending incentive, that's demurrage. People will get rid of that money as soon as they can. And they have a leakage inhibitor, which means 10%, it costs you 10% to change that money into euros. And though the money will stay in the country and strengthen the economy, as Trond has already pointed out. Let me go quickly to the differences. So, complementary currencies are used instead of profit-oriented, limited instead of general acceptance. They have a circulation incentive mostly instead of interest, transparent instead of obscure creation. Everybody understands how they are created. And so they allow a democratic control rather what we have today. And they are inflation resistant because they are always backed 100% by goods or services. Promote community instead of destroying it, and that applies to basic laws. And the most important thing, they are a win-win solution for everybody instead of only 10% of the population, which I showed in the very beginning. So the last 3 slides show a very important point for Maruza's proposal that today's money system is only optimized in view of efficiency. We have the most efficient money system the world has ever seen. We can exchange billions of dollars within seconds all over the globe. But we don't have resilience. We don't have a diversity and interconnections between different terms. And this has been the result of research on sustainability of complex living systems, that there is something like a curve and a window of vitality with the optimum moving slowly in this window of vitality. And the present financial system is geared to efficiency, so it's like a monoculture forest. If there is a crisis, it may well go under. So what we really need is more different types of money that will bring us to more resilience, diversity, and interconnection. Therefore, I think the effects of complementary currencies are very much, very important to have a stable money system. There are 3 books I wrote, and this was published in 1987. It's being translated into 23 languages. This is the new book about regional currencies, which has a lot more examples. And this will be here tomorrow as well, if the customs office will let it happen. 50 copies, and you can get it for the price of the publisher, because I don't want to earn money. I just wanted to have you to have the opportunity to get it. And this will come out in August. It's Occupy Money. That's basically the new version of this, even more easy to understand, so that everybody can really understand what is at stake and how we can create alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. House lights, and we now have time for questions. I saw one quick question over here, and it's questions, not statements. Please.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Hugo. I have a question to the Norwegian colleague and Mrs. Kennedy. What you are doing with the savings surplus, which exists nationally and globally, because this is the main device where speculation takes place and has the coming out effectively be also to these alternative systems which are brilliantly developed here, especially in the Norwegian case. I think this could be for some nation like Norway a solution, but in general the savings surplus exists always because of the inequalities.
No statements, questions, thank you. We'll have another question. Please. We'll do 3 in succession. One more question here.
Yeah. Hi, this speaks to 2 points.
Closer to the microphone.
Trond brought up fixing the structure, and the question basically for Margaret. You talked about the Greek example where you would plug money into the government to essentially prime the pump. And I think Trond's point and my point would be that the structure is broken, and I think you have to fix the structure before you can plug money into it. At least you have to plug money into the economy at the right level. I would say that would not be the government, it would be at a lower level, more directed. And what your local money speaks to that, but the Greek solution plugs money generally into a structure which is broken. And I just wonder if you could comment on that.
One more question in front here. And then we invite the panel as well.
We have got very interesting presentations. So I have one question to Margaret Kennedy. So in one of your slides, one of your slides, the alternative currencies, I think it was Austria or Switzerland, that one of the results was that, if I recollect exactly, in 13 months, there was a reduction of 25% of unemployment. Is that right? Yeah. So if this is correct, in the sense that it can be attributed to the alternative currency, if this is correct, then I have a problem that politicians wouldn't accept or refuse to such an introduction. There's no government, as far as I know in my lifetime, no government has succeeded in 30 months to reduce unemployment by 25%. So, you see, that would be the doubt expressed by the first speaker and the others, not President, but the first. Yeah, that there is such a resistance that there's almost no chance to be successful. But such an argument, if it is really fully proven to be attributed to the alternative currency, then I would, and governments supposed to know that, I cannot see that there would be resistance.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think we understand your. I think you've got your question across. Thank you. May we invite? No, just do 3.
So let me try. What to do with the assets, right? My feeling was, until I talked to Michael the other night, that would take care of itself if they were not getting interest. If they had, the solution would be, if they have to be invested in the real economy, then you would, the Sharia basic model, that you would take part in the gains as well as in the losses. I think that is okay, because then you are linking the money system to the real growth and the real decline. That would be point number 1. Secondly, I think that people who inherit a lot of money, they also tend to be much more generous with spending it, and so it would be, let's say, some part of it would be taken care of by just not. The only thing I'm trying to avoid is that there is an income from interest that is without work. That's the solution. But I guess that, I mean, Michael convinced me in talking to him, was it last night we talked, that he thinks the proportions are so out of any kind of normality now that is not possible. And I tend to agree with him, but that would mean that these assets, that they would have to go somehow. I mean, people will have to take a loss, you know. To which extent is another question. You know, in Germany after World War II, we had what we called Lastenausgleich, which means load balance. That meant that the people who came from the East and had lost everything, compared to the people who had stayed in the West and had kept everything, their houses, their property, and so on, that these people were burdened with costs that were being redistributed to those people who came from the East. And something like that, I think, could, yeah, if we understand right, that basically the system is as unfair as a war, you know, something like that. And then I did not quite understand your question, I'm sorry to say. So may I just go on to the Wörgl thing? You see, Wörgl was, I will ask you, Wörgl was a very specific case at a specific time, just before Hitler came into power, and people were sitting on the streets and absolutely having no work, having no bread, and the city government backed the 5,000 work certificates that they issued by 5,000 shillings in the bank, so the money was fully backed. And the people, they built a ski jump, they repaired bridges. It was basically spent through public works program, a little bit like the what's it called, the New Deal by Roosevelt. A very similar idea. The only difference was that the money they got had the stamp, the demurrage on it, 1% per month. And therefore, people, in order not to lose that money, immediately spent it when they got it out. And the town, what is the budget? Who has the guy who runs the town budget? He was surprised because they spent only 5,000 work certificates equal shillings into circulation, and within a month they had 15,000 work certificates equal shillings back, because people immediately paid even their taxes in advance to get rid of that fee. So I'm not so sure if it had gone on for a longer time, whether the high percentage could have gone on. But it didn't go on for a longer time because the National Bank was jealous, because 120 communities wanted to imitate the model, and then they got really afraid. In Germany, I want to add this, the German central bank has not officially talked about the regional currencies, but from internal sources we know that they say, as long as it's under 5% of the money we issue, we don't care. And it was very important for them to look at our website, and when they saw all the social criteria for the regional currencies, they said, that's a totally different thing than what we are doing, you know. So that was interesting. Now maybe you can, let me try to understand.
Okay, basically, well that was a good example of the work certificate. You're putting the money, you're injecting it exactly where it's needed, okay, at the local level. The example you had for Greece was that it was coming in at the top through a system that's effectively prohibitive. You're spending it through the government.
Yeah.
And to me, that's like a trickle-down effect. Or in the American economy, when the recession hit, they were urging consumers to spend more.
Yeah.
You know, that's like giving them bullets to shoot more holes in the boat. And what you're doing at the local level is fixing the holes in the boat. And I think that the solutions are very different, and we have to differentiate, you know, where the problem is in the structure and put the money there.
So it's more a comment rather than a question.
No, that was a question, but how would you defend then the application of money in through the top?
Oh, I see. Now I understand. Yes.
Good question.
Well, it does. You see, one doesn't exclude the other. I mean, the creation of a complementary currency at the national level would not preclude the local levels from also issuing their own monies. And now there are 3 examples in Europe. The city of Nantes, Ghent, and where's the third? I can't think of it by now. But this is the first time that complementary currencies come from central city governments. And the Ghent example, which Bernard Lietaer also initiated, is proving very successful. They are creating a real solution in those areas that are inhabited by migrants, because migrants can pay for having a piece of garden with the local money. And this is, I think, exactly what you're getting at, that you're trying to solve the problems in the local area through an additional means of liquidity. Is that right?
Well, yes, but also I'm saying fundamentally that plugging more money into the Greek government from the top will work.
Well, you see, they wouldn't have more money from the Greek government from the top, because they would have to back up the regional currencies with euros. So the money, the volume of money would not increase immediately, but the amount of circulation would increase, and thereby, by doubling the velocity, you double GDP. And therefore, there would be a better chance to create employment, to help the economy to really gain strength again.
I think we can give...
Maybe we can talk about it a little
talk
more.
offline, because
Yes.
there is a better solution that Irving Fisher had for the United States, to give it directly to the consumers. But John wanted to make a comment.
Yes, just and apropos to Margaret's remark about money velocity versus the Stockholm money, because there is a nice quote from Mikhail Kalecki, the Polish economist. Economics is the science of confusing stocks and flows. So, and that's very important. You can have a constant stock, but you can increase flows immensely with demurrage, which they did in Virgin. Yes. Okay. I'm not sure whether I got all the questions right, but when people, what do we do with all sort of savings, or I mean assets accumulating in the traditional or official money system? Well, I don't think that's our problem. The whole system is fucked, to use a popular expression, and it has to somehow collapse, or at least have a very big crisis. But I think that parallel currencies will help people in a crisis situation, and they will also increase the negotiation powers towards those who represent the established system, like I argued about Greece in my presentation. That said, I don't think that my proposal for what the Greek government could do will be listened to at all, because this is a political, ideological, psychological issue, and the elites that decide these things, they are completely embedded in granite in the way they think. So the way to go is NGO currencies. And then you only have the, only in quotation marks, the legal issues that you talked about. So you have to find some clever way to circumvent the legal issues. So let's make national exchange clubs that you can be a member of, and you exchange points. You don't call it money or currency or whatever, and you can be a member of the exchange club.
Tom, why don't we ask our central banker for her views on it?
Sorry? Yeah, but I'll just conclude on this, and that is that I believe that for a really creative business person, this is also a very interesting business opportunity for all over the place. Also in Croatia, where you have 20% unemployment, you can do it everywhere. I am sad to say that you can't do it in Norway, because people are sort of wading around in money. It's not a crisis there, but many other places.
I don't have much to comment, but I think it's an interesting point is about call currency or points, because if you call saving points or points, there is no problem. If you call currency, you will find some problems. And it was in this way that the governments, the local governments in Brazil are designing their own schemes to have saving points to do the people act like work for them to collect taxes. It's very, this example that I said, because they call about points. I earn 600 points, so I don't pay 600 reais in taxes, because I went to the store and I asked to the shopper to issue the bill, which is connected with the finance secretary of the government, and they can collect the tax from the shopper, not from me. It's like a kind of thinking different, but it's a kind of currency, because the government will gain more than if he put a fiscal there to see the books of the shop, because it's direct. So the people are developing different kind of schemes, and the only way maybe that you can call attention is calling points. But I think that maybe called currency in the future will be more interesting, because a question of transparency, because you will be able to measure the economic impact of local currency, and you will see the money that is connected with the real economy against the money which is not connected, and you will be more comparable samples with different schemes. So I think it's important point.
Thank you for that. Now, we've actually reached the end of the session according to the program, but you all arrived 15 minutes late. You all took 15 minutes extra for morning tea, and I was shouting at you. Nobody seemed to be interested, so as punishment, I'm not going to let you go now, because I saw lots of hands up and a lot of activity, but I'm going to be ruthless in making it questions for both the questioners and the answerers. No more further statements. Answer yes or no, and a little bit of we have ways. And so we'll go take 5 in succession, all right? Quick. And we have the first question here.
Let me just say that I think the 2 meetings back from the Club of the Road, Ashok suggested that we should organize our lives such to provide more and more goods and everything in the local communities. I objected the issue since I was working in China in the 80s, and I had experience in Chinese communes.
What's the question?
And I said that remind me of the Chinese communes. And today we don't live in the isolated world. We live in globalized world. So the tendency of globalized world is to have unique measures for everything. Money and currency are 2 different things. So what you are saying, in fact, is that you are introducing 2 values, local values and global values. So you have to qualify somehow through the local values to go to the globalized world. That is really confusing for me, I must say, since I don't see the way that we are stopping to globalize the world in all issues, not only diseases and transport, but economy too.
Can you just say your question simply, please? I find it difficult to understand your statements. Can you just say just your question, just 1 sentence?
Yeah.
1 sentence and you're finished.
Being professor of my life, it's very difficult to say.
Exactly.
Even to ask a question.
Exactly. One sentence and you're finished.
Okay, I can't say it in 1 sentence.
Okay, let's move on. Let's move on. Josh.
How do we get central banks in perhaps in developed countries to act as they appear to be doing in developing countries, especially South America? I know that in Argentina the central bank's recently changed its constitutional remit to include employment and social benefits as well as price stability, which is what we're all still stuck on in developed countries. So I just wondered if you could give us a bit more on why the Brazilian Central Bank has taken this different kind of attitude. What sort of strategies did you take to sort of get it on that path, and what are the lessons we can learn here in development?
Thank you, Josh. We've got that question. This man up here had a question. appreciate it.
Thank you very much. 3 questions. There's a lot of ego in this room. The VIA that you were mentioning, is the VIA accepted for tax payment? First question. Second question, you told us about the Wörgl experiment and the rise and fall. The fall was, as I understood it, that the central bank got nervous. So my question is, how can we take away this fear? Is there a thesis on that? What will happen if this is working on a large scale? Third question, to Mr. Anderson, you said 30% with this new money you bring in, you would invest for the public services. If in a country like Greece, we already have 50% or more in the public services, how do you incorporate that? Where are the jobs? What to do?
Thank you. I think you had your hand up.
Thanks. A question for Marisa. You said that the community currency was 100% reserve currency, but I just didn't understand what you, I mean, to me 100% reserve means that you're holding it all back, so to me it's like 0% reserve, and I just wondered what you meant by that.
Thank you.
Question for all the panel. What's the best way you found for staying up to date with all the latest innovations in actual implementation of currency alternatives worldwide, rather than theory, pontification and the like?
This lady here. Last one.
I'm just curious, isn't the alternative currency a symptom of the failure of the debt-based currency? And isn't it kind of like the debt-based currency, like lurking in the wings for the recovery of the 80 to 90% who are being so detrimentally affected by the debt-based currency, to re-sacrifice them in the future?
Thank you. Last question.
For Margaret, I have a very short technical question and then a legal question afterwards. Is the VIA currency convertible? I met a man in a train who complained he couldn't get out of the VIA currency. Sorry. Is it convertible? Is the VIA currency convertible? Or are they trapped inside it? And the other question is a legal one. There is an obligation in Europe to open calls for tender for public services, and you know, like kitchen canteen, school canteens, and so on. What do you think is a possibility of getting a legal ruling on opening up monetary services, which are public service, to competition from cheaper interest-free systems? And that's a legal question.
Thank you. Over to the panel. You'd like to go through them one by one quickly.
I always like questions that I haven't thought about before. This is incredible, because we have a problem with exactly this ruling that you have to be competitive in Europe, and therefore for instance, all the building infrastructure in a small village has to go out for tender, and for the whole of Europe. Absolutely stupid ruling. And now the question now is, how do we get a ruling that providing financial services cheaper for the local level, and getting a ruling that therefore I actually haven't thought about it, but I think it's a fantastic idea, and we should really follow it up. And we are getting now, when I say we, it's all the people who are trying to change this money system in Germany, and there are hundreds. And in Frankfurt, where they have a strong Occupy group under the EZB, the European Central Bank building, you know, they have also got a whole middle class group of people involved, and among them a lawyer who is in charge of consulting the criminal justice system about financial fraud. And he now works for the Occupy movement in Frankfurt. So he could be a very good source of trying to figure this out. And I wish we had more people like you in our rows, you know. It is absolutely fantastic what you have done for Brazil, and to find lawyers that are sort of behind us and to get them to check out the possibilities. Let me see if I can. There was your question about the symptom of failure and whether it is used any. Well, I think that a healthy money system is comprised of a variety of monies for special purposes. And to me, one day, and I could give you some other constructions of money rather than
you can do that offline.
And one day, I think we will be wondering how we could use the same money for sending our child to buy an ice cream around the corner and to pay cars from Japan. And I think that just like we don't have one building for every purpose and we don't have one clothes for every purpose, I think we need monies for different purposes. That is what I've come to after 30 years, and that would increase the stability and the health of the total system. It's like a monetary ecology, and that's a new idea.
Are you suggesting then that these monetary systems will remain in circulation even after the need for them seems to be so immediate right now? You know, I mean, are you saying they should?
Look, I think you're going to leave this offline.
Let's talk about it afterwards.
Because there are 6 questions and we've taken a lot of time and give other people a go. Thank you.
I wrote many questions and I wouldn't be able to do that before I get my word cut. So I'll try to answer some questions here. First one, it was when we talk about the monetary system, all of them denominated in legal tender. In truth, we have many kinds of monies inside the system. The difference is that the world today does not support only one single currency in the world. You have to deal with a multitude of currency all over the world. And you have to work at technological and legal aspects to make exchange in different levels. So you do not have only one single monetary area. The monetary area can be segmented according to special purposes or interests that you need money to do things. So there is today unveiled competition between the money that grows fast from prior monetary resources and the people who do not have savings account and who do not have prior monetary resources. They are being excluded from the system. This is because of the current financial system, the current monetary system is based on debt. And that's why the state cannot just issue more debt to solve the problem. How to involve a central bank or supervisor in the issue? The best way is show them that the efficiency of the system needs to include more people, even using complementary currency. The people need to be economic active in the real economy, so you have more product and then you can have more money. It's not so. The key is show that in the concept of an efficient financial system, you need or not a community or a complementary currency. The other thing is about the tax payment. To receive a tax payment in all over the world, it's necessary to have a law. So if any city wants to do that, it has to have a law, and this is in the legal system. It's not possible, but this can be constructed within the community, the correct level of the government. The other thing is in Brazil, the complementary currency are like discount coupons, and are all of them, and they have holding assets in official currency. So the discount in the merchants is what makes the system run. And they can give loans with no interest, and as they have discount in the shops, they can continue to do that. The other thing is how to be updated with the subject. It's very hard. I take like 1 hour a day to go to see what's happening, and from today to tomorrow the sites are updated. And if you didn't print what you saw yesterday, it's very possible that you cannot ever find the same paper in the web. This is a great question, and it's about information that we have too many and we have to select it. And I think other great issue is the convertibility, because the WIR system, it was supposed to be convertible, but it's not anymore. And you have different effects if it is convertible or if it's not. And you need to have different rules if it's one way or other. So I think
I don't know. No, you've had your go, and that's on the trial.
They employ 5 people to.
You can talk offline. Now, I don't think all those 5 questions have been answered. It's up to Tron to answer the missing ones.
We've tried to be fairly quick, and I can't answer all the questions either, but I'll take 2 of them. I think there was a guy from Greece asking about should we should we employ the mass of unemployed in Greece by the government in the public sector when 50% is already employed by the government? And I can understand the skepticism. I can also understand the contradictions within Greek society about privilege for public employees, blah, blah, blah. But I just want to note that there is a serious international research community on governments as employers of last resort. You have it in Newcastle, Australia, in Kansas City, in the US, where you have quite qualified economics professors who are into this and say that any government that issues its own currency can always employ the population fully. And the idea is that you employ people as a buffer stock, and if the economy picks up, people will stop working in the public sector and go to the private sector. So this is perfectly feasible. But for political reasons, I think it won't happen in Greece. So the idea is someone should make the National Greek Exchange Club using the mobile phone system. And just start doing that, and don't worry about public employment. See what happens. It's a very fascinating experiment. It's not dangerous, and it can be a success. Last point. The issue of 100% money by Elbron, I think you asked me about that. A government issuing an electronic emergency currency through its central bank means that this money is 100% covered by high-powered money. It's a parallel currency, but it's per definition completely safe because it's issued and held in accounts at the central bank. So it's 100%.
Well, I'm not convinced that they've answered all those questions, but I asked them if the questioners could get during the minutes left for lunch to approach the speakers and have a personal one-to-one. But in the meanwhile, I think we're now 15 minutes over. We've made up the 15 minutes we lost because you're all late coming in here. And so we now have to thank the speakers very much for their great contribution and great debate.